We actually have breaking news on Capitol Hill. I want to bring in Michael Schnell. She's outside Republican Senator John Cornyn's office. Michael, I don't know what this news is. Tell us.
Yeah, so Steph, this meeting, there was supposed to be a meeting taking place this morning at 10:30 a.m. between Senator John Cornyn, the Republican from Texas, a key member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche. Of course, John Cornyn is somebody who has held out his vote for Todd Blanche. He has concerns with that anti-weaponization fund and the IRS immunity settlement. John Cornyn for days has said that he wants to reopen that settlement, to kill the anti-weaponization fund on paper once and for all, and to also narrow the scope of the audit immunity given to President Trump and some folks around him. Now, this meeting, again, was set to take place at 10:30 a.m. John Cornyn yesterday said that it wouldn't happen unless Todd Blanche arrived to his office with paper in hand, ready to handle this thing once and for all. John Cornyn, a few minutes after 10:30, came out and told reporters that the meeting was no longer happening. So as of right now, John Cornyn is not in a position where he can support Todd Blanche for Attorney General. Now, of course, this is significant because the Senate Judiciary Committee is scheduled to vote on advancing Blanche's nomination tomorrow. Based on the breakdown of the committee, if just one Republican votes no, Todd Blanche's nomination is stalled. It can't go to the Senate floor and it can't move anywhere. And it's not just Cornyn. Thom Tillis, the Republican from North Carolina, has been aligned with Cornyn in wanting the anti-weaponization fund to be killed once and for all. So John Cornyn said that Chuck Grassley, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, needs an answer on where he stands by 4 p.m. today. Cornyn telling us that that's plenty of time to still sort this out. But I asked him, Cornyn, again, has been very clear with these demands for days. So what is the holdup? He said maybe Todd Blanche and the DOJ think that he's going to roll over and drop these demands. But he said that is not going to happen. And one more thing I'll leave you with, Steph. A very interesting thing happened as Cornyn was out here talking. A group of Epstein survivors had arrived. Of course, Todd Blanche's handling of the Epstein investigation, the release of those files, has been so key in discussing his nomination process. John Cornyn wouldn't engage with those survivors when he was out here, but then the survivors entered into his office, and they are now in a waiting area in his office. Unclear if it's to talk to the senator, to talk to his staff, what that may be, but a lot of moving dynamics and moving pieces right now. But the moral of the story is Todd Blanche does not yet have enough support to become President Trump's permanent Attorney General.
Wow. What's your take, Vaughn?
John Cornyn, Thom Tillis, in the year of 2026, standing up to Donald Trump. I know Michael's been up there. I've been on the Hill over the last 10 years. And the idea that Donald Trump would somehow drive those two senators to the point where they are holding up his attorney general pick is astounding. Remember Thom Tillis last year when I was up on the Hill early and was asking Thom Tillis about Kash Patel. He was essentially working as his conduit with other Republican senators and was there fiercely defending the type of work.
John Cornyn was Kash Patel's boy?
Thom Tillis. Sorry, Thom Tillis was Kash's guy. Fast forward, Donald Trump is making his governing situation harder, and it's just hard to wrap the head around. It doesn't make sense. The president of the United States is unfocused. He's not helping himself by demanding the SAVE Act, by essentially demanding that the slush fund continues to exist, and Todd Blanche understanding that he has to play along in order to maintain and appease the president of the United States. Look, Donald Trump effectively can get Thom Tillis and John Cornyn out of the U.S. Senate in 2027, but in the meanwhile, this is the one moment that he actually has majorities in the Senate and the House. There's no guarantee that next January he will. So it just doesn't make any sense. Objectively, as a reporter, it doesn't make sense what Donald Trump is doing. He's getting in the way. And finally, in 2026, after 10 years of governance, he's pushed literally Thom Tillis and John Cornyn to the brink.
So this is the piece that as political scientists, we're scratching our heads. When a president has unified government, that means his party and the party of the House and the Senate are all in control. They usually have that 2-year window before the midterms, and they lose unified government. We go back to divided government. They try and get everything done possible because they know that once the opposing party comes into power, then everything slows down. Donald Trump is just solely disinterested in the governance process. And quite honestly, he doesn't respect a lot of these Republican senators who consistently lick his boots. So even though they're constantly doing everything that he asks for, he does the opposite just because he can. We also have to be real about the fact that, one, the president lies constantly. And two, there are real questions about his cognitive abilities. So some of this used to seem very strategic. Now we have to wonder, is he really fully present with the magnitude
we have not heard
things
from
that
any
are
medical experts that we know that the president has any
cognitive issues. Common sense would tell this man that if you have unified government, you might want to actually pass some legislation, and you should not be the hindrance to your own party. And the number of Republican senators who've bent over backwards to give this man what he wants, knowing they'll have to go back to their respective states and their respective districts to twist themselves. They're consistently contorting themselves to make sense of things that are senseless and useless, but they continuously do it. And then once they do it, the president says,
but Christina, you're forgetting now they get to go home in August. And when their constituents ask them about gas prices, diesel prices, health care, education, the war in Iran, now they get to say, no. Anthony Fauci pled the fifth.
Right, exactly.
I'll just pick up on what you're saying, which is the emergence of this YOLO caucus that we're seeing in the Senate is a fascinating thing. And, in the months, interesting to see what happens here in the days ahead. But in the months ahead, I'm curious if they lean on that more. And we've seen Tom Tillis of my home state of North Carolina doing that. I think really embracing this role as a retiring senator, as somebody who can stand up to the president. And one wonders why that wasn't happening more before. But that's something I think I'm watching here going forward is how much is this sort of emblematic of the moment that we're in currently, or is it going to be something that we're going to see going to the midterms in November?
One thing, they're almost giving Susan Collins cover is one thing politically we can't ignore.
Explain.
They're taking the ire of Donald Trump. He's going to lash out at Tillis and Cornyn and Cassidy. But Susan Collins is just sort of hanging up in Maine, running for re-election, and she gets to keep quiet. She's not the one standing in the way of Donald Trump right now. They're kind of taking that fire. They're already not going to be returning to the Senate, and they're kind of taking it for her. It's kind of a fascinating subject. I don't know, at some point, will she cross the line and peep her head up, and will he take it out on her? Right now, those guys, they've already lost.
Michael, I got a two-parter. First, what comes next? Where do we go from here?
Yeah, the next few hours, Steph, are going to be critical here. As I mentioned, John Cornyn said that Chuck Grassley, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, has asked for his position where he stands by 4 p.m. today, presumably to decide whether or not to postpone tomorrow's hearing. Now, I spoke to Chuck Grassley last week, and he told me that they were not going to delay this hearing, but as John Cornyn said, he would probably rather delay it than see an embarrassing failed vote where Todd Blanche cannot move out of committee. So, again, the next few hours are going to be critical to see how John Cornyn handles this. He said he doesn't necessarily need to meet with Todd Blanche. All he needs is that piece of paper, reopening that IRS settlement that officially kills the anti-weaponization fund and narrows the scope of that audit immunity. Well, he has about 5 hours from now until 4 p.m. We'll see if there is any movement there. But this, again, is all in lead up to tomorrow's Senate Judiciary Committee vote, which is critical because, once again, if Todd Blanche loses just one Republican vote, his nomination is stalled and it cannot move forward.
Obviously, they are inside John Cornyn's office right now, but these Epstein survivors, for these Republicans who have to vote to confirm Todd Blanche, how much is this weighing on them? These survivors are not going away, and it matters to the American people.
Yeah, this has been a recurring story. Of course, we're actually told that these Epstein survivors who are right now in John Cornyn's office are visiting all the offices of Republicans on the Senate Judiciary Committee to hand deliver a copy of the Epstein files. This has, of course, been such a big topic when it comes to Todd Blanche, being as though he was the one who met with Ghislaine Maxwell before she had that prison transfer. According to former Attorney General Pam Bondi, who had testified before Congress, in Bondi's words, it was Todd Blanche who was overseeing the release of these documents. So the Epstein files has been critical for these lawmakers, particularly those on the Senate Judiciary Committee. You'll remember about 2 weeks ago, Todd Blanche had met with some survivors after the insistence of Tom Tillis that he would not be able to vote yes until Todd Blanche took that meeting. That meeting, of course, did not go well. The Epstein survivors saying that Blanche was not hearing them out. I saw them when they had walked out of the DOJ. They did not look pleased. So the Epstein issue has been a massive thing for these lawmakers, in addition to that anti-weaponization fund, in addition to that IRS audit immunity.
Vaughn, just talk about this, the Epstein files, because those survivors being there, these aren't Democratic lawmakers. These are not activists. These are women who survived horrible trauma and crimes committed. And Todd Blanche finds himself at the center of it. To Michael's point, you even have Pam Bondi pointing the finger-ish.
humans with undeniable stories. And I think history would show that those are the most damning and impactful political voices. They don't intend to be political voices, but whether it comes to the economy, to trade, down to being victims of rape and abuse
and they're not going away.
Trafficking, they're not going away. And that they have been outspoken, that they cut across political lines. And at some point, you can't deny those voices. And this has been the fact that Todd Blanche only met up with them for the first time this month to actually hear their stories is very difficult. And Donald Trump has made very clear that he's been dismissive of their accounts and the attempted connections to him and his own story. And Todd Blanche is the one who has chosen to put himself in the middle of this. That was a decision. He wanted to be Attorney General. He's the one that put himself in the middle of this.